All right. Let's do this. Hey, everybody, this is Michael Julian from One Vlog Podcast. Welcome to One, and welcome to One Music, which is a podcast segment that I have going on my YouTube channel here on One. And welcome. I'm super stoked that you're tuning in to listen to the podcast. I am broadcasting from Costa Rica. It is May 7th. It is a Domingo here, Sunday in Costa Rica. Pura vida to everybody out there listening. And for those of you who are not in the know, Pura vida means pure life. So welcome to One, where the podcast and the vlog is my offering to the global community as a one community to inspire us, unite us, connect us, and provide us with information, stimulation for better mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, and focusing on categories that include mind, body, spirit, and abundance. Things that we all need to focus on right now in such a heavy, changeful time in the world, and things that can inspire us and keep us thriving and surviving in this crazy world. And came up with the brainstorm to create One, which is my platform that connects people from diverse cultures and communities all over the world, hopefully, as it grows, to share our stories and our content. Going to be conducting more interviews and providing information that can better serve our mental, physical, and spiritual well-being, and also provide an introspective to our connection as human beings. And kind of an offshoot of my project, Live It Stoked, as I think it vitally important for us to do so based on the way of the world, the crazy world, and the fact that we are halfway living in our machines and figuring out a way to reestablish connection with each other out in the crazy world in terms of actual human connection. So I welcome you. So what are we talking about this evening? Well, the podcast tonight is about music once again, and the title of the podcast is Music in My Veins. And I wanted to talk a bit about my childhood, reflecting on memories in terms of how I came to be in terms of the musician that I am today, and how music has influenced me in such a huge way throughout my life. Actually managed to keep me alive, helped me to re-inspire, restoke energy. So, I don't know. I've been lately, like I said in my first episode when I was talking about being music in the 70s as a 70s kid, I was talking about the beginning of that. And in this episode, I think I'm really been thinking about the very beginning, you know. When I was a little teeny gromulin, little teeny guy, you know, music was just in my veins. I think from the moment that I came, you know, to be, I mean, upon my entry into the world, I was infected and you know, really influenced by music. Music was always the thing that leveled me out and grabbed my attention first and inspired me, you know. And at the age of 5, I was singing into a wooden spoon, you know, with gigantic headphones on that would barely stay on my head, which I rambled about in my first episode. And, you know, growing up in a house with rad records and a miserable library of vinyl, it was easy to get stoked about music. And of course, it was all over our culture and magical time. But when I was young, I guess it started with singing first. You know, I've always been a singer first. And I don't know why that is. Just immediately started using my pipes. You know, I would hear a song and I would just immediately lock on the song, love the song. And throughout the course of my life, I mean, I'm getting a little dizzy and a little foggy. I am a wee bit older these days. But I've always generally had kind of a photographic memory. Like if something hits me, I can take a picture of it in my brain and it's just there. And I used to do that with songs. Songs have always been and will forever be my love for soul and mind. And So just started singing to everything that my dad was playing in the house when I was young, before I even owned my own vinyl. And then just from watching shows, in the 70s, it was such a magical time back then in terms of just being a little kid and sitting on a couch and watching a TV, because the shows were rad. We had the best, coolest TV shows ever. Bud Yorkin had taken over NBC and saved it basically from going bankrupt, and created all of the cool shows of the 70s that were so landmark and so legendary, Sanford and Son, rad. Good music, the Jeffersons, Chico and the Man, All in the Family, it just went on and on and on and on. And I loved it. And I used to beg to stay up late to watch the talk shows as well. Growing up in an era where Johnny Carson was on air, was still on TV, and Saturday Night Live, those two programs, unbelievable how influential they were for me personally, just in terms of being able to watch music, I used to watch Saturday Night Live, the original Saturday Night Live, religiously as a child, when my parents would actually let me stay up that late, And back then it was such a strict thing, you can't stay up, because you're too small, you're too little, you got to go to bed. But I would earn it somehow, and on specific evenings they would let me sit there and lay down with a blanket and a pillow and on a hard floor in a family room in a ranch house in Tucson, Arizona, and I'd just absorb it, I remember watching, episodes of those shows and seeing like the Rolling Stones on TV for the first time, and just, my mouth dropping open, my eyes just getting as big as saucers, and just getting elated, like, wow, what is that, and just immediately wanting to sing the songs. And I was at that age, I was so little, where kids just kind of, if we don't know the words, we just kind of make it up. It's kind of like the theorem that has been discussed, about John Lennon, how John Lennon used to write songs in the beginning in terms of his drafts before he'd actually have a song really prepared, where it was just kind of rhyming whatever came into his mind, just to make sure that the cant and the timing were there in the verse, so it was icicle, motorcycle, and I would just do that. If I didn't know the words, I was making them up, but somehow I was in time, and the tone was there, and I was mimicking it in my little peanut voice, and just loving it, and it grew, and it grew and it grew, and for some reason, it just motivated me and influenced me so much, where and I was a kid, right? When you're a kid, you really have no inhibitions in so many ways, We're not afraid. We don't have inhibitions. We're not nervous. We don't think about what people are going to say or think when we do things. We just do them, which is such a magical, magical thing. Something we should remember, I think, as adults as we get older. But, yeah, man, I'd be doing it anywhere. We could be in the grocery store, walking down an aisle. I'd just start singing, we're in the car, I'm doing it. We're in the doctor's office, something came on that I knew. I was all about it, and it just kept going and going like that. And then eventually, I was old enough to start buying my own records, which I definitely talked about in the first episode of the podcast. And then decided, when I was a young kid in elementary school, music was in school, like it is for most. And because I was so highly influenced by classical music from my dad's mother and his dad, their house, and my father, our house, was full of classical music. We were listening to Debussy and Stravinsky and Chopin and Mozart and Beethoven and on and on and on. And of course, that was Vivaldi. Oh man, my love for Vivaldi is eternal. For those of you who don't know who Vivaldi is in the realm of classical music, he was the legend composer that all other composers basically copied. He was about 400 years before all of the other composer-arrangers. He wrote, I think over 700 plus concertos for every single instrument in a symphony. And sadly died a pauper in a barn. Go figure, happens to geniuses. But the Four Seasons and anything Vivaldi, Allegro, and everything, have always just been absolute pleasures for me to listen to, will be forever and a day. Anyway, got off on a tangent there. Whoopsie. Let's come back to the subject here, which is talking about, how I grew. So here I am, Tucson, Arizona, and I'm at Wrightstown Elementary School, which was right across the street from a place called Grace Ranch. It was out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, right at the end of our housing development, Desert Palms Park, was this little elementary school. And the history of the school was built in 1909. It's pretty crazy. This is the only school way out on the east side for anybody that was rancher, cowboy, or settler out there. And pretty epic to be able to go to this school just based on that. But ironically enough, it was across from Grace Ranch, which was a private property that was owned by the mob. Ironically enough, Joe Bonanno at the time in Tucson, Arizona, and real wise guys from Chicago settling in Arizona, set up shop, built a big complex of like 11 small homes and an art gallery, and called it Grace Ranch. They had their own little pond out there. And when I was young, my friends and I used to ride our bicycles and try to ride around the right side on the edge side of the property and sneak in there to go fishing in this little pond. We'd fish for like little bass and bluegill and try not to get shot at. Because it was a thing there. We were trespassing. They were wise guys. They didn't give a shit that we were kids. Not afraid to pack rock salt in a shotgun and pop one right off at us, which happened once or twice. Wrightstown Elementary School. And it's time for music. Music is going off, I'm young, I'm in the third grade, I'm kind of coming up, and I'm like, wow. All right, well, they've got the orchestra, and then they've got the band. And of course, I'm super, super motivated in terms of classical music, and I've got it in my little head that I'm just going to play violin. That's it. I'm going to be a violinist. And I was mesmerized with the instrument. I got to touch one and play around with one, a low-level one, at a neighbor's house in my neighborhood. And once I opened the case, there was just something that clicked, and I was just like, oh man, I want to do this so badly. And I knew, just by being knowledgeable and watching TV and actually seeing performances of people playing violin and understanding through just listening to vinyl that this is probably one of the most complex instruments to pick. This isn't easy stuff. This is going to be hard, And I think that's the reason that I was turned on by it. I was like, I want to do it because it is difficult to do. So I've got my head set on it, and I went home with the form. They gave us all little, forms to fill out in terms of your interest. Do you want a band, or do you want to be in the symphony? Be in the orchestra. And I brought it home to my mom and dad. I gave it to my dad, and he took one look at it, and he just immediately kind of frowned and went, well, I don't know. You sure? And he immediately started to downplay it, based on the complexity and the time that it would take and the attention that I would have to try to pursue the instrument at any level. So he was kind of, I don't want to say he was negative, but he definitely wasn't being pro about my interest here. And he was kind of like, well, Michael, I really think you ought to consider band. It might be a lot easier. It might be a little bit more fun. It's bigger. It's not so tight, Being in And an orchestra is kind of, kind of rigid. It's a lot more disciplined. And, he was saying things like that, and that was his way of just basically saying, no, you're not going to play the violin. So I just, super bummed. This is the relationship with him, throughout the course of my life. I'd be like, yay, I want to do this. Nope. No, you're not. Oh, man. So I immediately shifted gears and just said, thought about it for a day or two. I went to the powers that be at school and said, hey, man, I couldn't turn in my slip because I'm not certain about playing the violin. Is it okay if I still make a choice? And they were like, of course, it hasn't started. And, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I'd like to try to be part of the band. And you had to pick an instrument. And I immediately picked alto saxophone. Now, the reason I did that, obviously, was the fact that I've been listening to a ton of jazz in the house and just really cool music that had horns in it. I was listening to a lot of R&B and soul music and, watching rad programming too. We had Don Cornelius was on TV. We had Soul Train, with Don Cornelius. It was amazing. And of course, lots of horns in that music, you know what I mean? So, Sly and the Family Stone, and then, just funk, all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, cool. So I'll do the dorky thing at school and I'll learn how to play, but then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to teach myself how to play some funky shit and play some jazz. That was my thinking. So it came to be. And I was very, very blessed, and I'm grateful to this very minute to my mom, who took me to the first music store in terms of getting a musical instrument I'd ever been in. Walked in the store, and lucky that we walked into this particular store. It had really high-end instruments and beautiful stuff. And I saw this one horn that, oh man, it was rad. It was brass and silver. So the whole horn was brass, but the keys and all the machine on it was silver. And it had all this grand and etching engraved on the flute of the horn. And I just immediately was like, oh, that one. And it was really, really expensive and super expensive to rent. And the guy kind of, told my mom the price tag, and she was like, yep, not that one. Pick another one. Teacher's salary, And, of course, I'm bummed. I'm just like, no, man, I want that one. So we're kind of in this standoff in the store. And so I finally caved, and, I didn't really have a choice. So I got an alto saxophone that was a little bit down level from this one. It was just all brass. Still a beautiful horn. And got this rad custom mouthpiece that was, I'll never forget that. That was rad. That made me stand out. This is one thing about me, I don't know what it was. Ever since I was young, it was like, it had to have style. Whatever I was going to be doing, it had to be unique. It had to be something that nobody else was doing, And the mouthpiece on this thing, in the case, he just had it in the case, sitting in a little box. And it was like I don't want to say plastic, but it was a type of a plastic, but it was maroon, and it was translucent, and it had this rad little logo on it. And I was like, oh, that's rad. I want that too. So got the mouthpiece and embarked on band. And I'll never forget it, man. I, played first week. We're doing Camptown races, man. This is where you start when you're a beginner, shit like that. And I took to it like a fish to water, and I just loved it. Of course, it was driving my parents crazy, you know what I mean? I think my father was trying to save himself from the pain of what he'd have to go through listening to me try to learn the violin, what kind of awful screeching, howling sounds would come out of my bedroom as opposed to dealing with the saxophone. But dealing with the sax was probably just as bad. I mean, saxophone's pretty loud. We lived in a pretty small home. So was just doing it, just blowing and going and learning it and taking to it really quick and loving it. And I don't know, maybe 2-3 weeks into it, I'm first chair in the band. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm the man, because I'm picking it up pretty quickly. And the teacher's like, very well done. And you're reading music pretty nicely. So started reading sheet music and staff, which, it's kind of wild now to think about it, how it just fell away from me. But that's basically how I started, and then I went on to junior high school, played in the band in junior high school, played horns and played some tenor saxophone as well. And in between there, in the summers, started to learn classical guitar as well. And that was the thing. I really wanted to play guitar. And I was just all over the place as a child because I was constantly engaging with sports. I was one of those kids who was, I was pretty good at everything, just blessed that way, just lucky that way, just grateful that way. And, played soccer from the age of 6 through every single year. I was playing tennis. I was racing bicycle motocross competitively. And so everything else was kind of the fitted in. I'd literally be changing, uniform in the car to get into regular clothes to go to a lesson. But I was blessed in that I had the support of people who were, pushing me to follow through with this. And my guitar teacher at the time, his name was Brian Johnston. It's this rad, cool, peaceful, kind of real tranquil, soft-spoken hippie in the 70s who studied with Segovia, which was a huge deal. He got chosen when he was 15 years old from the United States to go to conservatory to study under Segovia in Spain. And in terms of classical guitar, it doesn't get any richer than that, man. That's the top of the top in terms of learning and becoming, a master classical guitar player. And this was my teacher. And he and I hit it off. He liked me and I loved him. He was a really amazing teacher. And I was trying to learn hard pieces. This was hard stuff, and he asked me what I was interested in and what I'd like to do. And I told him Vivaldi, and he kind of chuckled and said, okay, we can try to focus on some of those things once we get you acclimated. So that was my world. And I would just try to keep up my studies and try to keep up, what's going on around me, and then deal with sports and playing guitar and playing horn. And I just kept that up for quite some time. And then, I don't know, life takes turns when you're growing. Everything's happening so fast. And in high school was kind of a tumultuous time for me. Beautiful as well. Still in sports, and was on tennis team and actually played football for a year. And then ended up changing high schools for the last 2 years of high school in Tucson. And during that time, I wasn't playing. I wasn't in any bands. I wasn't doing anything really. The only experience I had was before I changed. I did sing in a band for a while called Bass 6. That's what they called themselves. And it was at Saguaro High School in Tucson, Arizona. And it was an epic situation because I was a freshman back then. And the guys that formed this band were seniors, which, is a big deal, Seniors don't hang around with freshmen. But I happened to be very close to the drummer in this band. His name was Philip Wheatley. Philip was a rad guy, and he liked me, and he allowed me to come to his house because his house was on the way home for me, walking to my house from school when I would have to walk. This was before I had my car. And could take myself back and forth to school in my own car and shit. And so pretty cool, we'd walk together, and we'd go into his house, and his mom was kind of a single mom, working lady, and she was never there when we were there. And Phil had a rad practice room, so I was just always wanting to play his drums, and he would let me. And he was teaching me some drums as well, so I was kind of learning how to do that. And during that time, he was in this band called Bass 6, and they were playing this amazing music. They're doing really, really cool shit, playing a lot of Police songs and playing some ska stuff. And this is when U2 had just really come on the scene. And it was wild. I mean, really in the United States, we hadn't really been hit by them yet. I mean, I wasn't aware of who they were. But Philip had knowledge based on the lead singer of the band, Stuart Lee, and they turned me on to U2, and man, I was hooked in terms of listening to those songs and singing those songs. So that was the thing, and I, at the time, they were kind of bummed with Stuart's voice, and I happened to be there. I used to go there when they used to practice, and I was singing the songs, and one day I just, said, can I try to sing a couple of them, even if, you don't want me to be in the band? And they were like, sure, go for it, man. And they started playing, and I started singing, and immediately they were like, holy shit, you can really sing, man. And I was like, yeah, well, I love it so much. I feel like I have to, sometimes. And it just so happened that the talent show at the high school was coming up, in a couple months. And they were getting ready for that because they were going to be a big draw to this thing. They were the best band, in the school. And I went to a relatively large high school in terms of how many kids. So you knew that the theater was going to be full that night. And so pretty cool, got to perform with Bass 6 and sing some songs and got to be part of that scene for a while. So that was a memorable experience. But I think that's how it shaped me up to be who I am today is, that kind of, that path, singing first, horns second. Definitely had interest in the piano as well. Forgot to put that in. We did make a trip all the way to the East Coast. My mom had roots in Long Island, New York, and one summer my parents put together this big trip to go all the way across the United States to go see New York and go to Connecticut to visit her relatives. And her Aunt Marie and Uncle Arthur, those are their names at the time, had a baby grand piano in their house. And I mean, I saw that thing, flipped it open, and was just like, oh, and I was just, they're like, get away from that. I didn't ask. I didn't do anything. Marie came in the room. She's like, oh, it's okay. He can play the piano. It's fine. We haven't played in a long time. It sounds beautiful. Let him play. So I just was all about that too. So piano, and then it leading to classical guitar and studying with Brian and loving that and really being into that. And then it went from classical guitar to acoustic guitar, and my brain's kind of foggy, I didn't take more than 3 or 4 lessons from this lady. There was a lady that helped me back then. Her name does not come to mind. I can kind of see her face, but I'm at the age where that's okay. But ended up playing acoustic guitar now. And of course, because I had, 2.5, 3 years of classical guitar under my belt, it came very naturally to shift over. And now I'm really starting to find my path. Now I'm starting to really get groovy. Now I'm starting to go, okay, now I can see myself getting toward the things I like to do, because the acoustic guitar, of course, was a path and a lead into playing eventually electric guitar and getting closer to doing what I really wanted to do, was play some rock and roll, play some cool hippie music from California, play, things that I loved that was in the house, and of course the acoustic guitar was everything that I love today, those Cat Stevens songs, which are spiritually moving eternally for me, Yusef's songs and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and being influenced by Neil Young, playing his acoustic songs and listening to Joni Mitchell in the house. So that's really how that kind of stuff came to be for me. And from there, kind of just went on with it, and it was kind of another dead patch. And then it's wild how things occur, they're on and they're very bright white light, and you're in it, and then life takes a shift and all of a sudden you stop doing it. So there was a span of time there where I stopped playing. I was, now trying to figure out what to do with my life. I'd been to the University of Arizona for a couple of years and kind of wasn't particularly certain what the hell I was going to do with my life. Moved to California, It's a long story I don't want to get into. It's kind of irrelevant now, but ended up joining the military, ironically enough. Wow. And during the course of my path, leaving Santa Monica, California to go to Lawton, Oklahoma in basic training. Jesus. When I was there, one of the guys that was in my platoon happened to have a guitar. Okay, so I was playing again and kind of enjoying it again, and then got out, moved to California, Laguna Beach after I got out of the service, when I was married back then, and my ex-wife's brother was a prodigy musician and a producer to this day, and was really into wanting to play solo acoustic stuff, and she was from New England, and I had made a trip out there, but we were living in Colorado Springs at the time, so they were kind of doing the same thing, where you go and you play at coffee houses and small joints, pubs and taverns that really were, promoting open mics and hosting open mics for singer-songwriters, and I got into that, and I started playing and trying to write my own songs and playing covers. So it's just been in my veins, and I'm so grateful and blessed that it still is, even though life has taken the turn that it has taken right now. Music has been not completely silenced, but it is on the back burner right now until I get things together again. It looks like changes might be occurring here soon. And I know, as crazy as it sounds, I may be entering back into the United States with a new opportunity. So I am trying to manifest the energy to produce another amazing musical situation like I had here in Costa Rica and before, in terms of having all the gear that I need and having a band back together and fronting again and having a great time with music. But yeah, that's basically the memory and the whole thing right now in terms of this podcast. It was about music that is in my veins and how that came to be and what a blessing that is. And for anybody out there listening to this podcast, if you're one of those people who, says, well, I love music and music's cool, but, I could never be a singer, or I tried guitar once, I just can't do it, any kind of thinking like that. I just want you to know I've been a music teacher off and on for over 25 years, and I'm here to tell you that if your heart is beating inside of your chest, you are a musician. And whatever you thought you loved to do or had interest in originally, go right back to it, especially now, based on the fact that time is so precious. Because the bottom line is you can, and if you want it, you can definitely achieve it. I've done it, and hundreds of millions of other people have done it. All you got to do is open your head and your heart wide open. Go for it, and just enjoy the idea that you're trying to do it. That's the thing. If you love what you do, which is the rule to everything in life, I think, that we're learning now, the bottom line is it's going to come. Eventually it will be yours. So that was my thought for the podcast tonight. I hope you enjoyed my ramble-blamble about memories and why music is in my veins. And I know it's in yours too in some capacity. I believe that all humans have the capacity for music, that we are all musically built in terms of the inner beatbox and drum inside of our chests called our hearts. And for anybody listening out there anywhere in the world, in any time frame, any time zone, whether it be your morning, your afternoon, your evening, I'm sending light and love and positive energy for mind, body, health, and abundance. And I really appreciate you tuning into the podcast. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the comments section below. I'm going to be putting up new content, new podcasts, and we'll be conducting new interviews soon. So stay tuned for all of that. And until then, stay positive, stay rad. We are one. And until next time, this is Michael Julian. Stay safe out there.